Mannette was the Ernie, and they were the Gays. They were called, that's their surname, the Gays.
Yes.
And then how did Davidson, who was the Davidson?
They're relatives. Everybody's relatives.
I know, but...
On my grandfather and grandmother's side.
On both sides?
Yeah, and they married sisters and brothers, and sisters and
Oh,
brothers, sisters and brothers. That was all part of what happened up there, right?
Okay, well, I guess we'll leave that part of the story. Let's go back to Prince the Horse. Or shall we talk about a little bit more about Bob's Garage?
Bob's Garage?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Bob's Garage had a pit, and it was a real pit. So instead of having a lift for the car, you had a hole dug in the ground. Nobody had
like
lifts.
when you go now to like Mr. Lube's or whatever.
Yeah.
They're underneath your car.
Yeah, except they're open and they got a bathroom down there and whatever. And
yeah, they've got.
In Bob's Garage, you got the shovel and the tractor out, and you dug a great big hole in there, right?
Yeah.
And before it was probably just a garage before, and then you needed the pit as business increased. Then you poured a couple of long pieces of cement, or you just put timber in, and then Bob could slip down inside and do oil changes and reach up underneath the cars. So, of course, Bob was, just like Freddie the Fisherman, Bob was the ultimate jokester, right? Oh, he was...
Is that a Nova Scotia thing?
I don't know. It wasn't my time, I'll tell you that, right?
Yeah.
And Bob, when he was underneath there, you didn't know. You'd pull up in the gas station for gas, and Bob would be under there doing something, and he would slink out and crawl across underneath the car and take a bottle jack or whatever jack he had and raise one wheel just very, very little bit off the pavement. And then suddenly Bob would be there to fill you up. So Bob would fill you up, and everybody else except you knew what Bob was up to, right? The practical joker. So you could pay him off, you get in the car, you put it in drive, there was no pause and traction, and of course the car would just sit there. Whee! And then they'd all start laughing, and my father would get out of the car and he'd go, "That goddamn Bob, Jesus Christ." It'd be the same joke over, but you could never catch him. He was so sleuthy. He was so sleuthy.
He took great pride in making sure it all
so
went
Bob
off without
was
a
a
hit.
specialist for pranks, the prankster stuff. He did it well.
It sounds, well, I guess you entertained yourself. There was no television or...
Well, they went to Bob's Garage, as we discussed at night. Bob's was the men's club. And they all sat around and they smoked. None of them drank. If they did drink, I was not privy to it.
The moonshine.
But it was a little corner store. He just had the little junk food there, chocolate bars and the pop machine that was in the cold water that we've talked about before.
Oh,
right?
yes, those
the old
machines.
Coca-Cola job where you put 10 cents in and half an hour later you get it out of the maze and you could pull it out, right?
Yeah. Those were with the rails.
Yeah, with the little rails. And you took it for a long walk. And then when you put your dime in, then you pulled it out of the water. And you pulled up at the end, right? So you could get any selection you wanted. So Bob had one of those machines, and then it was 10 cents, right, for a bottle, and then it was 2 cents for the refund for the bottle to turn it back in. And one day it used to be 5 cents, and it was a penny for the refund for the bottle. All bottles had refunds. So Bob had that there. So they'd listen to the hockey games on the radio before days of television. And Ernie and my father and Bob and Vernon and all the men would gather up at the stage. And the women would be abandoned. Right? They'd all complain and whine about, he's up in the garage. And my grandfather would go up after dinner. What days and nights he went, I don't know. Probably the weekends when there was a hockey game was on. And then the men would be all there talking and carrying on, gossiping more than any woman would ever hope. And we would suddenly be in the house, and where's Granddad? Oh, he's up at Bob's. Where's Ernie? He's up at Bob's. The cars would be up there. We got pictures of the Buicks and the Oldsmobiles and 40 Fords and 41 Fords and 39 Fords. And
so that was the men's club.
Yeah, so that was what I call the Porters Lake Men's Club. Right?
The Porters Lake Men's Club.
Yeah.
And how many guys were there roughly?
Who knows? I'm going to guess 10 guys could show 5. Who knows?
Yeah.
But Bob's, that's for the socializing, just like the pool halls and the bar, pubs and whatever. Well, that's what they had in Porters Lake, was Bob's Garage for those guys who were around there. And that's how they passed their time.
At Bob's garage.
At Bob's Fina, finest in North America.
And how was Bob as a mechanic?
Who knows? Good enough to do the basics. Just like today, you get a good guy who can do the basics. You know, brakes and tune-ups and tire rotation and repairs. And Bob was uneducated. He had no background, nothing. He didn't go to school. He just was good at it, and that's what he did. And you took him up there, but if it was complicated or this or that, you didn't take it to Bob. And Bob took his time of getting around to it. So if you're in a rush, you didn't go to Bob's. But you wanted to honor him, and you wanted him to be part of it. That was his living, and that's how he made his money. And Bob did everything. You could rent an old truck. My dad would rent his 3-ton or 4-ton stake Ford truck with my grandfather's engine in it from his old truck when it rotted out. And then we take the wood in to put it into Dartmouth. So you rent it from Bob for the day, and he charged you for the day to rent that truck. Bob had his hand. He had a little wrecking yard across the road. When your car was too much and you had enough of it, then you would give it to Bob. He'd drag it across the street, so he had his own little wrecking yard over there, which grew as time went on, right? I remember that.
So he was a wheeler dealer of sorts.
At that scale, but not a wheeler dealer. But if you needed a part, and they were almost all Fords, and almost everybody had Fords, so if you needed a fuel pump or a carburetor, Bob would know.
Yeah.
Right? When my grandfather's truck rotted out, that 48 Ford F1, the army green one that never shone, then that engine was low mileage. They didn't use that stuff a lot on the farm. Then that went in the big truck, that big flathead V8.
Wow. So Bob's, besides the grocery, besides the
oil changes, tune-ups, flat repair,
and he
gasoline.
Was 7 days a week.
Probably not Sunday.
Oh, not Sunday.
Probably not. But if you ran out of gas and you're in Porter's Lake, you could phone Bob. He'd go to the station, open up, fill you up.
How far was his home from the station?
His home?
His home.
Kilometer.
Oh, a kilometer?
Yeah, nobody went far.
Oh,
gas bills weren't high then, Ted.
I thought it was more kind of like across the street.
No. There was, well, if you look on a map of it, there's little back roads all in Myers Road and whatever in the back, and that's where the houses were. Across the road was all field.
So what is your first memories of Bob's garage?
Of Bob's garage?
Yeah.
My dad with the Vanguard and Bob jacking it up, and my dad getting out of the car going, "That damn Bob." Because when Dad put it in,
and you were wondering what was going on, what your dad's talking
put the car in first gear, right, and nothing happened, and he just get out, "That damn Bob." Right?
So that's your first memory.
And you had to beg Bob to drop it back down because you had your Sunday clothes on and you didn't want to get dirty, right? And Bob would do it to everybody. And there was no mercy. You could complain and say how stupid he was, and that's a bad joke, Bob. You've done it 100 times. It's not funny. He kept it up. He would never stop.
The more you complained, the more he was happy.
The more reward he got.
Yeah.
That was Bob's way. And Bob never served in the Second World War. He had an impediment of which I don't know, but he couldn't serve in the war. And there's a picture of him that you have with my dad's uniform on.
Yeah.
Right? But those guys and
that's right. I remember you mentioning that.
And that's some of the guys who all hung out at Bob's garage at the time.